And tonight, Be'ezras Hashem, we're jumping back into Ana B'Koyach. So some have already been asking me about the Ana B'Koyach series I'm doing, and they can't find it. Where is it? And it's not an Ana B'Koyach series. It's a Shabbos series. But the Ana B'Koyach series has taken on a life of its own, really. And it's important for us always, hopefully, and I neglected to do this with the last stanza, we have to tie it back into Shabbos, right? Otherwise, so we're learning a lot of important ideas, and we're learning the depth of the tefillah of Ana B'Koyach, but it's important to always bring it back to understand, okay, but this is connected hashkafically to Shabbos, right? And that's why it is where it is. I'm right in the middle of Kabbalah Shabbos before L'Chadaydi. So tonight we're carrying on to the fourth stanza. The stanza of Barchem, Tahareim, Rachamim, tzedek-tzaddik-tzeddakah tamid gamlim. Barchem, bless them. Tahareim, purify them. Rachamim, there are two versions, either Rav Kook has Rachamim, have Rachmanas on them, and then tzedek-tzaddik-tzeddakah tamid gamlim, constantly shower them with your tzidkus, with your righteousness. That's one version. Or you can say Barchem Tahareim, bless them, purify them, and then Rachamei with a yud at the end instead of a mem, Rachamei tzedek-tzaddik-tzeddakah, your righteous mercy tamid gamlim. Two ways of reading it, but we're going to stick with Rav Kook's version because that's really, we're learning the whole thing on derech Rav Kook.
Can Rachamim not also mean that, like, give them Rachamim, like, give them the koyach of Rachamim?
Can also be Rachamim. Yeah. Gift them with the gift of compassion, that they should have mercy on others. They're beautiful.
And the Mamela, they anyway get mercy because Bishrachu.
Right. Kol merachim ala briyas merachim alav min hashamayim. Okay, so before we take a look at the sources inside, let's just talk a little bit outside of something very, very important. Picking up where we left off last week, speaking about previous stanza. We have 3 shiurim on it. Nagibar, thank you. Nagibar darshe yichudcha kevav hashamreim. We learned so much depth about that in the Rosh Tevis and the words themselves. So we were speaking over there about the Anagas HaYichud and the Anagas HaMishpat. We spoke about this hidden realm of Keser, Chachma, and Bina, in the upper world, that hidden place where everything is connected, everything is one, everything is unified, everything is creator-oriented before things start to turn into another creation. And we spoke about the lower midas. Now, as the Shefa of unity begins to manifest in that lower realm, in that lower structure, what we call the 7 lower midas, from Chesed down to Malchus, it first begins as apparent fragmentation, right? And we spoke at length about this. The upper energies manifest, mi besari echse eloka, in our physical structure. They manifest unified within the skull, the cranium. The body starts to split really into 2, at least on a physical way, without getting into the eyes and the ears and the nose, which are in the head as well. But the body begins to split by the arms. All of a sudden, we have the concept of right and left, very apparent, extremely apparent, really starting from the shoulders, which is all the inyan of the arm. Right and left. This right and left is the inyan of Chesed and Gevura, which are the manifest energies, so to speak, of Chachma and Bina. What Chachma and Bina are in this spiritual, metaphysical realm beyond become the energies of Chesed and Gevura down in the building blocks of creation, as it were. But in that place, as we're going to learn, there's what's called zivuga b'tedira. There's an absolute constant unity between these 2 energies. Right? You cannot have a Chachma-oriented mind without a Bina foundation. You can't have a Bina-oriented mind without Chachma. The cognitive processes work, they're intertwined. But all of a sudden, when that starts to play out in an active process of creation, you have extreme Chesed, without limits, without boundaries, and you could have the opposite, is extreme Gevura. Those 2 things join in the next Midah, which is called Tiferes, and that was the Midah of the stanza that we learned last week, which is the Midah of Yaakov Avinu vis-a-vis Avraham on the one hand, literally, on the one hand, and Yitzchak on the other hand. Yaakov Avinu brings them together. They get further refined. We've spoken about this at length in previous year in Netzach and Hod. But ultimately, at the level of Tiferes, it's already ready, right? It needs a little bit of tweaking, but that is a unified energy that can manifest within this world. It's a manageable energy. It's something that we can inculcate into our lives to enable us to engage in the chachma and in the chesed and the gevura of life, all the circumstances, with a consciousness of the unity of things. It's down here in this world. Then it needs tweaking a little bit, netzach and haid. And then ultimately, the next midah, the second to last midah, yisoid, is really just a channel. It's not an or, it's not a light of its own, it's a kli. That's why it's called kol, in that very famous pasuk that includes references to all these midas, which we say every morning, L'cha Hashem ha'gedula v'ha'gevura. Hashem, yours is the chesed and the gevura, v'ha'tiferes, v'ha'netzach, v'ha'hoid. And then, ki chol b'shamayim u'va'aretz l'cha Hashem ha'mamlacha. Malchus is the final midah, Malchus, l'cha Hashem ha'mamlacha. And then there's an empty space that doesn't seem to have any reference to a sphera. But it is a reference to the sphere. Ki chol is a reference to the midah of Yisoid. The Arizal points out that Ki chol is gematria Yisoid, literally, on the dot. Ki chol is gematria Yisoid. Yisoid is called all. Why is it called all? Because it is not a fragmented energy. It's not introducing something new. It serves as the channel for all of the midas above it, primarily the midah of Tiferes, to bring that down, so to speak, and allow that to become manifest through the interface of Malchus, which takes spiritual code, as it were, and brings it to the front end, so to speak, of a website or of an app where it's functional. And now you can operate it, and now you can interact with it in an easy way without needing to know the strings of code and how that and what that is. That's the energy of Malchus. Malchus is also called Kol. They're both called Kol because Malchus also it's not a channel; it's the receptacle for all. But where all the energies are taking root, are manifesting, as in the upper midas. They become channeled down in Yisod, which is of course the bris, right, which is a mashal gashmi, so to speak. Not really a mashal, is a manifestation of these spiritual principles. What's the Yisod? Takes all the DNA of the person, transmits it. Malchus is the kli, is the receptacle. Okay, now things can take root. Now things can flourish. Now things can grow. We have an interesting word in Lashon HaKodesh that's called tzedek. Tzedek. Tzedek means righteousness. Tzedek means justice. Tzedek-tzaddik-tzeddakah. Tzedek. Fairness. Right? Justice. Tzedek. The reason why it's interesting is because much like there is a male version of the word eish and a female version of the word eish, and it's not just a male or female version of the word eish, it's literally the name for woman and man is the word eish, conjoined with either a yud for man, ish, or a hey for woman, isha. The same is true for the word tzedek. You can either have tzaddik, which is tzedek with a yud, or tzedakah, which is tzedek with a hey. So it emerges that there are three things. There is tzaddik, there is tzedek, and there is tzedakah. Without getting into all of the shiurs of this, thanks for coming, Yehuda. Without getting into the pratim of it, the Shari Oira, which is an early introductory Kabbalah sefer written about 800 years ago, a Talmud of the Ramban. So the Hilgah Shari Oira explains that tzaddik is a reference always to the midah of Yisoid, to the bris, to the channel. The pasuk says, "V'tzaddik Yisoid Olam." Tzaddik is the foundation, is the channel of the world. Yosef HaTzaddik, because of the midah of bris, it's the channel that brings the energy down through it. Tzedek is Malchus, it's the receptacle, and tzedakah is what tzaddik gives, so to speak, to the midah of tzedek. It is called tzedakah, which is the feminine aspect, because it's what fills, so to speak, it's what saturates the kli of tzedek, of Malchus. So tzedek, right? Tzedek is the light, is the R. Tzedek is the receptacle, thanks for coming. And tzedakah is what's flowing between them. We're speaking now about the very, very end of the 7 lower midas that we discussed in earlier shiur, and just our last stanza, we're talking about that world of unity beyond, and so on and so forth. And we would hope that that would manifest within our revealed reality. It's not just enough to know about these concepts and believe them. We want to see it manifest. We want to feel the unity of the world. We want to feel bracha, Hashem's presence, and so on. How does that take place? Chesed and Gevura, like we said, are still fragmented. They come together in Tiferes. But Tiferes needs to be channeled into Malchus. How is it channeled down into our reality? Through the Midah of Bris, through the Midah of Yesod. And this means a million things. But we're just explaining it very basically to understand this stanza. Tzaddik is Yesod. Tzedek is Malchus. Tzedakah is what flows between Tzaddik and Tzedek. Let's see how he brings this inside, Tahareim, and then we'll take a look at the Rav Kook. Nimtza. HaTzedek meichin leTzaddik. The job of tzedek, what this means, righteousness, is to prepare for the infusion from the tzaddik. Sheyuchal laharik shefa bracha shehuhu hatzedakah. So that element of tzaddik, which is the bris, can channel down shefa. That's called tzedakah. Said hashefa b'shash shenitein b'mekablim, which is the secret of what is being channeled down. That's spiritual energy that's coming down finally in that place to be able to manifest and infuse the physical created world. B'chinas hamalchus hakriya tzedakah al shema ar hamiskabel ba. And then malchus becomes called tzedakah. It's the feminine aspect. It's the recipient. Tzedakah. The midah of tzedek is preparing the kli. The midah of tzedek is preparing the kli. And then we have this element of tzedakah that's able to flow down into the prepared kli through the channel of tzaddik. These three elements, very important. So what's fascinating to note is that, of course, the seventh stanza, which hopefully Be'ezer Hashem will cover in El, I guess, when we pick up the series again, we'll talk then about Shavasenu Kabel Ushmat Sakasenu Yodea Telumas. That's all Shabbos oriented. Why Shabbos? Because it's the last. And if these are connected to 7 days of the week, which are connected to the 7 midas, the last stanza is connected to Shabbos. The first 6, the tzaddikim explain, connected to the 6 days of creation, are really 3 and 3. Because whatever material was created on the first 3 became embodied in the second 3. This stands out very strongly in the first midah, the first day and the 4th day. How so? The first day is created light and darkness, and the kalim for that light and darkness, sun and the moon and the planet, and so solar system and so forth, are manifest when. Thank you so much for coming. Here are the sheets. Are manifest on the 4th day when we have Yima Iris, right?
Last week, I think it was last week 3 of 3. We discussed this once before.
Yeah?
So.
Could be. I don't think last week, but it could be in
3 weeks ago.
Yeah. Okay. So we're reviewing this idea then, 3 and 3, and so now we have to think back to the first stanza. What was the first stanza all about? Remember, Ana Bekoyach Gedula Simincha Tater Tzura. That's like this nullifying experience of bittul. Everything should be shattered. No kalim. Chesed, chesed, chesed. Like on an incredible level.
Light and dark didn't have kalim.
No kalim, exactly. Mamish, no kalim. No kalim. Now something subtle is going to be happening, and we're going to talk about this in the context of how we're going to see Rav Kook lay this out. It's the same idea as the first stanza, but it's a lot more embodied. It's a lot more kalim oriented. Eina Chanami, what we're davening for in the first stanza, it's real. And there's a part of us that wants to feel that. And on that level, that's what's taking place. But everything in Kabbalah is relative. At the end of the day, we have to get real. It's the end of the day. We live in a physical world. It's not, things are not being shattered and you have to have a part of you that feels that way. But then there's a part of you that comes down to quote-unquote reality and starts to relate that experience and that desire to the kalim that we're bound by in the physical world. And that's what this stanza is going to reflect. So now let's take a look at the Rav Kook with that introduction. Every word here is very precious. Let's try to go through this carefully and clearly. B'siyata d'shmaya, with the help of the Master of the World. Barchem, Tahareim, Rachamim. Says the Heilige Rav Kook. Ha'oros ha'elyonim. Those elevated spiritual energies, Geshehem moifiyim ala neshama, when they make their appearance upon the soul. Ala nishmas ha'klal, both on the soul of the collectivity of Am Yisrael, our national spirit, V'al nishmas haprat, and then in the life of each individual person. He marchivim es mahusa, ma'atzmim es havayasa, u'ma'alim oisal l'moreme ha'oisher anitzchi. This experience is an experience of expansiveness, rachav, which, like our video for the 3 weeks of Yaakov Danishevsky just today, if you saw it, spoke about the difference between rachav and cherev, right? And charev means destroy. It means constriction. A person is constricted. Harchava is the opposite. Geula, right? We contrast Mitzrayim with Eretz Yisrael, which is called an Eretz Taiva Urechava. What's Mitzrayim? Means Meitzar, means constricted. Eretz Yisrael, it's a much smaller land, infinitely small, not infinitely, but extremely small. Keneged Egypt, Keneged Mitzrayim, but it's an Eretz Taiva Urechava. You could breathe there. It's not Koitzer Ruach, an Indian of a Meitzar. It's big. It's broad. Right, exactly. Anani B'merchavka. So this is what this light reveals. They expand all of reality. They strengthen the reality of the soul. And they can elevate this soul. They can elevate our consciousness, our perspective. Says Rav Kook, what word are we going to use to describe such a phenomenon? V'zois hi habracha. Says Rav Kook, probably paraphrasing V'zois habracha. V'zois hi habracha, this is what bracha is. This is what we mean when we say bracha. Bracha, as the Maral explains, Beis is 2, Reish is 200. It always means to expand, to double, to triple, to quadruple. A breicha, right, is a source of water, a channel. Baruch Ata Hashem, that Avshachayim explains, we're asking that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's a spiritual bounty should cascade down through all the olamai, should manifests within the world. We're not blessing Hashem with anything. Hashem is perfect. He has everything. What we're saying is Baruch Ata Yud Kei Vav Kei, let it overflow. Amin Yehei Shmei Rabba. Rabba is a merchav, should expand. Says Rav Kook, that's what we mean when we say Ribbona Shalom, Master of Heaven and Earth, Barchem. Reveal in our reality this experience of bracha. Hamushpa'as mi chesed kel elyon. That is mushpa'as, that is emanated from the midah of chesed kel elyon. Amnam, however, kishem shah elyon hamut'am el shorish haneshama humali bracha. It's true that light is full of bracha, is full of expansiveness, and it wants to just shower the soul of the klal and the soul of the prat with incredible degrees of spiritual energy. But kacha hakoyach hamugbal v'hamutzumsam. He says, to that same degree, let's not underestimate the constrictive nature of the human being. The kli is very small. Remember, we spoke about kalim and ar. This is all the first stanza, but over here it's a much more pragmatic way of relating to it.
The nefesh is the kli. It's interesting.
The nefesh. And what he's in.
Guf,
huh?
As opposed to the guf.
As opposed to the guf, well, nefesh is that, as opposed to neshama. Yeah. Nefesh is the lower neshama, so to speak, as manifest in the guf. Ke'adam hu nefesh. But v'chol koyach mechubur b'hagbala u'mitzayim hu achos b'migr oisav shehin hein tuma oisav. There are constricted pathways that are blocked up with all kinds of tumah, with all kinds of constriction. It's not that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want to give. The kalim aren't ready. Therefore, says Rav Kook, well, what's going to be? The bracha wants to flow down, but the kalim are tiny shot glasses when you need huge swimming pools. What are you going to do? Says Rav Kook, tzarech tahara. How do we clear the channel? It's much like a person who has clogged arteries. How do we clear the channel? Through tahara, a purification process. A purification process. Can you imagine if this is how he taught tshuva in yeshiva? What does tshuva mean? Not a guilty or shameful thing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to shower us with tov. And then tshuva, which is what the whole El, Rosh Hashanah, Saras Tshuva, Yom Kippur, ultimately 4 days to Sukkot, the whole, and then beyond to Chanukah even, the whole experience is just preparing kalim. It's the most exciting thing in the world. Who doesn't want bracha in their life? Who doesn't want love in their life? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is ready to give it to you. I'm not questioning, judging this. It's just a metzias. You stick your hand in fire, it's going to burn you. If you pull your hand away from fire, you'll be okay. Right? And that's what the process is. We have to move toward what we're gaining, not like move away from what we're going to lose. And that's what it is. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to purify us. So that influx of divine sustenance can rest within a person's life. So that it can come to rest within those kalim that are noisei habracha, that there shouldn't be any component that's not able to handle this bracha. Al-Kain, says Rav Kook, therefore, this is what we're davening for. Barchem. That's step number 1. Let the heavenly channels be filled. Let them flow forth bracha. But at the same time that we daven relating to the R, we also have to make mention of the necessity to fix the kalim. So that's Barchem and then also Tahareim. These two things have to go together. Yeah?
It looks like Cook's understanding this, you would think that it would be Tahareim first.
Well, if we don't, I was thinking of this as I was preparing this year. If we don't have a source that's filled up, that's saturated and ready to give, so then you could have all the bottles in the world, but if you don't have the keg, whatever, to pour into them. So in a way, you're right. In a sense, tahara is the prerequisite for. But the first thing we're saying apparently is that the even higher midas should already have poured there. It's like
it's always flowing. It just depends if you're ready to receive it. It's just always flowing. It's always there.
It can be.
The shefa is always there. It's just that the kalim can't always receive them until Tahareim.
That's right. But remember, all the different spheres are makabel one from the other. And so even though there might be shefa in its source in bina, let's say, we're first davening that it should move down into chesed. Everything has to move. Everything has to flow. And then from there, we should have the kalim. So that's barchem. First, let the source be filled with shefa. And then Tahareim, let me have the kalim to fix them. That's how I understood it. Right. Okay, so Al-Kain therefore hinenu mavakshim biyachad barchem Tahareim. The kasha bracha hi miyisoid. Harchavas hachesed, when the bracha flows down into that reservoir of chesed, hanoiher umispashit bulim etzarim, that wants to just expand in all directions endlessly. V'hatahara hi mimikar hayisoid shalagvura hamitzamtzemes, because that's what tahara is. Remember we spoke early in one of the other stanzas. Which one was it? Tahareinu naira, right? Tahareinu. Which stanza was Tahareinu in? What was the midah of the second stanza? The first is chesed. Second is gevura, right? And we explained tahara relates to the kalim, right? And the kalim is the midah of gevura. This goes back to the very first shiur in Anabukach that we had about the Shem Mem Beis, which all of Anabukach is about. So over here you see that Rav Kook is learning about it like more horizontally as opposed to vertically, right? We've been talking about the shefa flowing down, and we're going to get to that in the second paragraph with Tzidkascha Tamid Gamlim. But now Rav Kook says there's an element of chesed here and an element of gevura. The element of chesed would be the bracha. That's the element of the chesed elyon that wants to just pour vitality forth. But we need adequate kalim. How do you get adequate kalim? Gevura. Discipline. Tahara is the site of gevura. That's what it means to become tahara. It means to stay away from. That's what it means. That's the site of tahara, is to build up the kalim. Says Rav Kook, chesed and gevura. Barchem, Tahareim. Chesed and gevura. So now he says, "V'kasher habracha hi miyisoid harchavas hachesed hanoiher u'mispashit b'li mitzarim." That's the bracha. That's the union of chesed. And v'atahara hi mimikar hayisoid shel hagvura hamitzamtzemes, which is the kli. Shebeshefel ispashtusa, that in the lower realms where it functions, harei hanoiseid tzarich tahara, so it needs purification to clear all the channels and rectify the kalim. So says Rav Kook. Now we could understand the third word. When you have the proper R in the proper Kli, which means the proper Chesed with the proper Gvura, which means the proper Avram with the proper Yitzchak, what then do you have? Miskala toichen harachamim ba'olam. That's the midah of Tiferes, which is always the midah of Rachmanis. Chesed, Gevura, and Rachamim. It's Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Says Rav Kook, when you have Barchem and Tahareim, Mamela Rachamim. Then you have this perfect, I call it a horizontal bond, right? Of Chesed on one hand, literally, like I said, and Gevura on the other hand, coming together this way. Okay, now we have Rachamim, like we said. Now there's a unification, the Shefa is ready to flow down. Right? And that's the first tikkun. Barchem, Tahareim, Rachamim. Hamimazeg es hachesed ves hagvur. Ve'im kein anu hinenu aimrim. We say Rachamim. Be'rachamecha harabim hamasachdim es habracha ve'es hatahara. That's what the midah of Rachmanis is. Chesed means hispashtos. You just want to give to everybody regardless of what it is and whether it's right or wrong and whether the person is the right person to receive it or not, just to give. Rachamim is chesed that is discerning. Chazal say, call him rachami risha'im achzari. Right? If a person has rachmanis on the wrong person, it's adar. That's not rachmanis. It's achzari. Right? Person has rachmanis on a murderer, a serial murderer, and say, "Oh, we feel so bad for him. We can't lock him up. That's not nice." That's not rachmanis. That there has to be din in the world. That's the inyan of Yaakov Avinu. That's the inyan of Hachra'ah. That's the Ad Sheyavi HaKasav Hashlishi V'Yachriya B'neiha. What were the first two ksuvim? Pasuk A is Chesed. Pasuk B is Gevura. Then you have a Kasav Hashlishi that's Machriya B'neiha, right? And is able to present the concept in a more balanced, nuanced way. That's the inyan of Rachmanos. That's what it means to be compassionate. It's Chesed with a Cheshbon. And that means, what is Chesed with a Cheshbon? Chesed with Gevura. So these two things are producing Rachmanis.
I've heard it before that to put together the last word of the previous stanza, so Shomrim, and then Barchem Tahareim, it spells Shavat. Is it something particularly in the time of the year where Klaisel needs an extra shmir, and then Barchem Tahareim, the Shalavim weeks going into Adar and Nisan. So
beautiful, very beautiful. Shvat
as well, which is
beautiful. I never heard that before.
It's interesting because it feeds into Yosef Tzaddik, and it's usually around that time as well. So
gorgeous,
it's
gorgeous, perfect. Barchem, Tahareim, Rachamim. Okay, so that's the first side of the stanza. Now we go to the vertical yichud, right? First we're speaking about Chesed and Gevura. That's horizontal, so to speak, right? From the right to the left. That produces Rachamim. Now we flip it, and now we look at the yichud between Tiferes, Rachamim, and Malchus, right? Which is, so to speak, vertical, from up to down. And how does that take place? Through the channel of Yesod. So we've gotten to Rachamim. We started in the previous stanza with Keser, Chachma, Bina, the Olam of Yichud, the Shirish of everything. Okay, but we'd like to see it manifest in this world. So we have to have the Ar as it manifests and the Kalim. We do what we need to do to become Tahar to the extent that we can work on ourselves, build the Kalim properly. It begins to manifest. And then the Yichud takes place. Says Rav Kook, that's what we're moving into now. Tzedek-tzaddik-tzeddakah. What do we learn about tzedek-tzaddik? Tzedek-tzaddik-tzeddakah. It's all wrapped up in tzedek-tzaddik. It's that whole triad. It's that whole structure of Tiferes, Yesod, and Malchus. Bizman she'ein sham chibur, says Rav Kook, in a time where there's no chibur, there's no connection. Shal habracha im hatahara. Az afal pi she'nimtzei si habracha, maybe there's bracha. It could be that from time to time there's a brief illumination and a person feels lit up, even if he doesn't have the requisite tahara. It can happen to a person. Or tzaddik says he could win a lottery physically, financially he says he could win a lottery spiritually also. It happens, a windfall. All of a sudden a person just has a special trip, or they're zeichet to, a physical trip, or the person to be clear today, or a person can also be zeichet to some great spiritual illumination that's low Lefias Madrega. It happens sometimes. But that's not called a yichud. That's from time to time. But in order for things to be consistent, it takes kalim. You have to have kalim. Otherwise, things fluctuate. This is a big side. Because a lot of people are after they're after R. We want spiritual experiences, and it's wonderful. And that needs to be our focus. That's the ikar of Yiddishkeit, is to experience R. But if we're not at the same time, to the best of our ability, each of us in our own circumstance, working on kalim, which means things like discipline, and being focused on mamish tamidim kasidram, like really trying to be shomer, etc., etc., etc. So then, whatever R we have will only be what's the word? Not dependable. Inconsistent. And all of us are yearning to live lives of R. That's where the work is. The work is in the kalim. So he says, "Bizman she'ein sham chibur shel habracha im tahara." As afal pisha nuntzis hi habracha. Sometimes the bracha is still there. Umeira hi lefa'amim bivrakel yoinam ala avayos. And sometimes it'll come down like a lightning flash. Boom. Avaloy tamituchal tzedakah zu lehiskayim. Says Rav Kook, maybe that's why he's referring to it as tzedakah. This kind of tzedakah, it's not like maybe we could say it's not a hora'at keva, right? It's a one-time gift that the person makes. You know, you have these charity campaigns, you can click if you want it to be a monthly thing. It's not a monthly thing. It's a one-time charity. This tzedakah is not lo tuchal tzedakah zu lehiskayim. Ki choyser hatahara, because the kalim haven't been purified. Maybe she'eza kir ve'eza timtum mis'ar lahafsik as shifas al yaina shall birch hashemayim and etzala. Right after some time, the reality that the kalim are not strong, brings back the mesius in the person's life, where the bracha retracts, and then there's this constant up and down, and there's this constant back and forth. Aside from this, that it's true that all the while that tahara is not there, that kalim aren't there, the bracha cannot be constant. It cannot be a bracha that's going to be ultimately conducive for the person. It's not going to fit the contours of his life, because it'll come down as just this enormous splash, and whatever it is, and sometimes it'll be healthy, and sometimes it won't be healthy, and sometimes it will be processable, and sometimes it won't be. Sometimes you'll be able to integrate it, sometimes you won't be. It's not within a kli, and so not just that it's not constant because it's not tamid. Sometimes it can come down into a person's life in a way that's not even helpful. It can leave the person more confused than clear. Sometimes it can be overwhelming for the person. It's not whether it's a national revelation or a personal revelation. It's not betur gemul. It's not an aspect of gemul. What does gemul mean? Wages. Person works for something, he gets paid commensurate to that. It's not like that. It's a gift. So a gift is sometimes you get a really great gift, and sometimes you get a pair of knitted socks that you're never going to wear. It's a gift. So a gift can go either way. It's neither here nor there, right? But a person who earns something, you know what it is, right? You work this amount of hours, you had an arrangement, there's a shtar, there's a commitment. It's commensurate with what you work. It's not nama de kisufa, right? B'tor gemol, haroi lehem mitzad atzma, right? It wasn't earned. And so therefore it's in every sense of the word, it's unstable. It's not stable.
It leaves the receiver even more confused than before.
Right? It can. That's what he makes reference to.
And then now something's missing. Now they realize something's missing.
Right.
The point is not necessarily always to give it over as the what's given over. It's to create the yearning, the need for it. Sometimes, it's gone. So I want to go look for it. Whereas before they didn't even look. They didn't even know that
It's
they were
true.
look for
That's
it.
true. That's true.
Yeah.
Sometimes there could be a benefit to this because it shakes a person up. Sometimes, or it can make a person very discouraged because, like, what was that? Now I don't have it. We experience this Yom Kippur a lot, right? After Yom Kippur, you have such a holy time, and then finished. Anybody read the original Paddington book? You know, the original, like the actual first one?
Years ago.
No?
As a kid, yeah.
Anyway, so there's like this one page. I almost thought that tonight I was reading it to my kid. I wanted to take a picture of it and post it Motzei Yom Kippur because he has his bath and he never saw a cleaner looking bear in your life. I mean, that illustration when he comes down the steps and that's how I feel Motzei Yom Kippur, like Paddington the bear. No, mamish, like it's the greatest symbol of cleanliness. Whoever the artist was, he chopped it. He must have. Who? He must have walked by a shul Motzei Yom Kippur and looked inside. Because mamish, this bear is shining. Makes sense. Makes sense. He understands Torah. So it's interesting. It's interesting. I also think that difference in culture between. They don't have Paddington in the States. It's a very British character and a very British book. It's mamish. It's the manifestation of the difference in culture. The children's books. In Paddington, almost nothing happens, and when it happens, you can miss it if you blink. It's like in Curious George, like on the first page, he's in trouble already, and something dramatic is happening. And like in Paddington, it's like what is this? Like they're drinking tea, and like right, exactly. Like what happens already in a Paddington book? It's like mamish British children. I think what can you do? It all makes sense. But they can get very clean. They can get clean after Yom Kippur. So, B'tur Gemul, Haroy la mitzad atzma, al b'zman shehabracha v'ataharim is ha'chedes u'mischabris b'yachad. Once we have the Barchem and the Tahareim, azba tzedakah liyayna b'kviusa utmidusa. Then you have the concept of tmidus, which is something that I could speak for myself. I'm yearning for. Because all of us, wherever we are on the journey, especially conscious Yidden or spiritually oriented, we know what R looks like. We know what Kalim look like. What's the tikkun? The tikkun is not that we need more R or more clarity into how to get Kalim. It's to put the two together. The mamish put the two together to work on building Kalim for the R, so that we can achieve consistency in a way that, and it's a constant process. But this is the tikkun of our generation. This is the tikkun. We have the R, we have the Kalim. We have to put the two together in all the ways that implies.
So it's Midas, that's the challenge.
It's Midas. And now Rav Kook explains, why do we have a challenge with Midas? Because we have R, but Kalim is the Ikar Avaida. The problem is when all we have is Kalim without even knowing that there's R, so that leads to its own. That's all. So either we rise to a place that's unrealistic, or we fall down to a place that's completely dark and devoid of any light. The key is to put the two together. It's the Beis of Bereshis or the Aleph of Anochi. Beis of Bereshis, the created physical world, the realm of two-ness, of multiplicity. Al Eila Ani Boichia, Eila, which we'll talk more about. Yeah. And then, right, Eila Lehachi Yisrael, exactly. And then the Aleph of that realm of the Torah, the spiritual unity, to put the two things together, the Aleph with the Beis. That's something. Right? That's something. That's Tmidus. And then the Shefa that comes down into our life is also in accordance with it's appropriate for that person, for that experience. B'tur Gemul hara'i lahem l'fi midasam shehi tachlis ha'isher. That's the greatest Aisha there is. It's the greatest joy. It's the greatest happiness. It's the greatest stability there is. And that's what we're yearning for. Shasimchas olamim kshuraba. The eternal joy is bound up with that experience. Says Rav Kook, now plug all that back into these three words. The way he saw this is unbelievable. Tzidkascha. When we've achieved Barchem, Tahareim, Rachamim, and then Tzidkascha, there's a yichud between Tzaddik and Tzedek, and the tzedakah is flowing between them, and there's mamash a yichud. Then two things happen. Number one, tamid. It doesn't go away. It's consistent. A person is consistently, balancedly, so to speak, plugged in. And gamlim. It's in accordance with that person's kli. Tzidkascha, tamid, gamlim. That's Rav Kook. Really applies. Let's take a look on the page if you can. And let's read down. We spoke most of it outside. Let's just see some of it inside from Rav Sasson, and we'll conclude with the chart. Says the Heilige Rav Sasson, V'hine, Ikar bakashasenu mushreshes b'mila tamid. He says, at the end of the day, we have a 6-word stanza here, right? Barchem, Tahareim, Rachamim, tzidkascha, tamid, gamlim. What is the heart and soul of this stanza? Which word is the most important word in this stanza? There are a lot of concepts, but what is the foundation that all these words are centered around? Says Rav Sasson, the word tamid. Tamid. V'ini ikar bakashasenu mushreshes b'mila. Tamid. The most important word is the word constant. Sheba onamavakshim, because in that word we're requesting shia yichud bein hamashbiya lemekabel b'tmidas Allah yahafsaka. Because like Rav Kook says, that yichud will happen from time to time. Like that, it happens in people's life. People have great experiences. That's not what we're davening for. That happens. And sometimes, even undeserving, a person will experience that lightning flash of Kirvas Elokim. The Iker Tefillah here is the word Tamid. And here we see the Siyata D'Shmaya that our Chabura is having, because this is mamish having to do with the Churban. Now we're going to talk about the Churban, and what we're davening for, what we're yearning for in these 9 days leading up to Tisha B'Av. Yoideya, he says, Shahayichud ben Kutchabrichu l'Knesset Yisrael einanu shalem ve'einanu tadiri. That relationship between Kucha Barichu, which, as we've learned many times in previous shiurim, is a reference to Tiferes, right? Rachmanus, to that transcendent element of godliness that's waiting to saturate our physical world, the male aspect, so to speak, and then the Shechina, right, as the indwelling, as the literal way that we experience life in this world. Malchus, that zivug is called Einena Tadiri. It's not a constant. And this is what we bemoan, and this is what all of our mitzvahs are for the purpose of l'shem yichud kutshabrichu shchinte. We want to build kalim, and that's what the mitzvahs are for, which is so incredible, because the whole thing of the mitzvahs is kalim. All the mitzvahs, connection, right? But discipline-oriented connection. It's not some loose, spiritual experience.
Hashem says, this is how
exactly, mamish, sticking to what he says. It's all kalim, building kalim for that art. However, but when there's sin, when there's deviation, we'll talk more about this Be'ezus Hashem Sunday night in our pre-Tisha B'Av Chabura in my home, Be'ezus Hashem 36 Shar Hall Park. I'll send the flyer to the group. 8 o'clock. So he said, we're going to learn what the shirish of this is in a very, very deep way. There's the element where the yichud is put on hold, and that's the side, not of gerushin. It's not the end of the relationship, but it's the secret of nida, where there's a separation. Why is there separation? Because there's tuma on the part of the makabel. Nothing happens with mashpia and nida. Nothing happens. No physical change, no spiritual change. The male is ready to be mashpia. This is the side that the female, which is this concept of malchus. And this doesn't Chas v'Shalom say anything about women. It's not the Indian. It's all spiritual concepts. And all of us have this aspect in a spiritual sense. But it means that there is some kind of blockage on the part of the Mekabel. And Memela, that leads to what? Separation. Specifically now, Mamish, in our time, what are we davening for? We want the Beis HaMikdash. What was the Beis HaMikdash? Was the primary Yichud Kutshabrichu Shchinte? Was there any place with more Kalim than the Beis HaMikdash? Literally, the Beis HaMikdash was filled with Kalim. Right? We sing Eicha about what? In the Megillah. Not just the Megillah Tvaks have Simchas Purim. That's also true. But we sing, like they say. But we sing that in Eicha because that's where the Iker destruction is. On the level of the Kalim. On the level of the Kalim. And on Purim, it's a very deep side. On Purim, where there's such a Giloy of Baruch Haman and everything is Yichud, everything is one. Einoid Malvade, Mordechai Yehudi, the Medrash says, Mordechai Yechidi, right? The Ibechin of Yosef, etc. Mordechai Lo Yichav, Lo Yishtachav, that perfect clarity. Lech Knois Kala Yehudim, which is the Indian of unity, which is the opposite of what Haman said. Yeshnai Am Echad, Mefuzar, Mefired Beina Amim, etc., etc. The whole Indian of Purim, we cannot forget that it's true. We can taste on one glorious day of Purim, one glorious day of the year, what that reality would look like. Ein oid malvade kipshute mamish. But let's not forget that there's a day after Purim. It's Shushan Purim. Okay, Shushan Purim is still very high, but there's a day after Shushan Purim, and you go back to your regular life. And why is that? And so, Mineu Be on Purim, we're singing an Eicha tune and an Eicha nigun about the Kalim of the Beis HaMikdash, because that's why every day is not Purim Dik. Every day is not Purim. Because the Kalim of this place of the Beis HaMikdash, we lost the Kli. That's what the whole bias was. It's a Kli. We're going to learn Be'ezus Hashem on Sunday night. Hashem Malach gave Slavesh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wore the Beis HaMikdash like a Kli. And when he left, he ripped the Kli. Beat Sayim Rasai. We're going to learn on Sunday night. He ripped his garment. A garment is a kli for a person. It contains the person. The whole inyan of the Beis HaMikdash was a kli. The kalim of the Beis HaMikdash were specific kalim for spiritual energies. The kehanim and the Kohen Gadol absolutely was supposed to be these incredible, exalted mekubalim. Understood the tikkunim, everything that was going on, pili applies. And when that breaks down and Am Yisrael go into Galus, it's the site of Nida. What's the site of Nida? There's a blockage on the part of the Makabah. We didn't have kalim properly anymore. So the Iker Cheshkenu Urtzainenu Hu Letaher Es Yisrael. This is what we want. That Am Yisrael should really build kalim again. She Ru'uyim Lekabel Shefa B'Tmidos L'Lay Asaka Klal, which actually is the site of Yaakov Avinu, which is the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi. This is so deep. The first two Batei Mikdash can't last, because the first Beis HaMikdash is connected Avram, just R. Second Beis HaMikdash is connected Yitzchak, just Kli. The third Beis HaMikdash is going to be forever, because Yaakov Avinu loy meis. Because Yaakov Avinu is a balance between R and Kalim. Memela, it's tadir. It's always. It doesn't blink on and blink off. It is. This is what we're davening for. That the yichud should be tadiri. V'al kain therefore on a mischanin and Barchem Tahareim. Barchem b'soid ha'mashpia. Tahareim b'soid ha'mekabel. B'chinas hanukva and teres mitumasa. That aspect of the feminine spectrum that becomes cleansed from whatever blockage there was. And then she becomes ra'oi once more for this intimacy. We want that tuma, so to speak, should be completely banished. So that Am Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu should be able to have this yichud tadiri again. Alkein mischanenim tamid gamleim tamid yashefa al bracha mikoyach hayichud. There should constantly be this yichud. Take a look at 1 second. Take a look at this on your own time afterwards. Okay, take the sheets with you. Not gonna go into this Indian now. It's gonna be another 15 minutes for sure. He goes very deeply into the shirish of this yichud being in bina, where bina, like we said earlier, is always one with chachma. That there the zivug is tadiri. It is constant, and that's the side of the essential relationship between Hashem and Am Yisrael on that level of Hanagas HaYichud, where there's always that bond. It's true, but we want to manifest that in a more manifest way. And this is the side, I don't think that he brings it here, this is the side of even when the Beis HaMikdash was being destroyed, Chazal say, most beautiful Chazals, what did they see? The Kruvim, or Mu'urim Zebazeh, were intertwined, we're hugging, we're embracing, while the destruction is happening. And that means that there's always a place where there's a zivug tadiri. But now, in the fourth stanza, we're trying to come down to the Olam HaGashmi. We're trying to take that first R of Ana B'Kach Gedulus Mincha Tater Tzurura, and we're trying to say, okay, how can we actually experience that in our life? And that's called building the Kli. But to be aware that it all starts in that place of Bina, which is Olam Haba, which is the place where Am Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu are always bound up. Let's take a look at the chart. Let's just a quick review. And Be'ezras Hashem, at the end of the series on Ana B'Kach, we'll hopefully have a little booklet with all the different ramazim from all the shiur.
I need a small chart for my Ana B'Kach. Can't remember.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So we'll have them. We'll print them into a little booklet. It'll be very beautiful. Barchem, allow the heavenly channel to fill with spiritual bounty and blessing. Or, on the concept of tzedakah. Tahareim, prepare the vessel by purifying it properly, removing the impediments to it receiving in the proper way. This relates to the Kli, relates to the concept of tzedek. And then Rachamim. This will produce a harmonious state. The proper balance between light and vessel, chesed and gvura, giver and receiver, that's yichud, and that's the job of the tzaddik, is to bridge, which is to fill tzedek with tzedakah. Tzidkasra, may the coming together of the elements of tzaddik and tzedek, which allows the divine bounty of tzedakah to flow down into our realm, tamid, be constant, a continuous experience of yichud, kucha, berichu, shchinte, the manifestation of the light, like we just referenced, of bina, the revelation of our essential unity with Hashem, and gamlein. In this sense, the transference of this blessing will be seen as having been earned. It will manifest as a result of the effort we put in to bringing this reality into being, which means that the shefa will be consistent and will be fit, without overwhelming and without leading to riboy ar, right? Or like the Svarim say, riboy shemen, too much oil puts out the candle. It has to be the right amount of oil, otherwise it will overwhelm the wick, and then you won't have a flame anyway. So everything has to be in its proper measure, and that's our bracha to all of us. As Hashem, in this time, as we get closer and closer to Tisha B'Av, and we're intensifying our yearning, this is a really strong foundation to stand on when we think about what we're davening for. Tzimidus, very, very important concept. The kelim of the Beis HaMikdash, the kelim in our own v'shachanti b'saychan, the mishkan that you and I are. We should have proper kelim. Should be zaycha to zivug tamidi, be'ezus Hashem, to cleanse the vessel and to become